Hey everyone, welcome to another video. So today we are going to talk through my pick for the top 10 Pioneer cards from Edge of Eternity. So Edge of Eternity seems like a pretty sweet set. The cards are powerful, and as a bit of a sci-fi fan myself, I do like the flavour of it. I appreciate it's probably not to everyone's tastes, but it doesn't feel too much like a hat set in the way that Aether Drift or Outlaws at Thunder Junction did. It feels relatively kind of faithful and authentic, which I think is good. And maybe the last set that I enjoy for some time, given where we're heading next, but more on that later. So yeah, I'm going to run through some of my top picks for the Pioneer format. So yeah, we'll get into it. But in the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I do appreciate the support, and there's lots more gameplay videos that you'll find on there. And I have a Ko-fi account in the description, so if you're able to support the channel that way, then it is greatly appreciated. So yeah, Edge of Eternity. So I'll start with a few honourable mentions, and I'll just highlight a couple of these. But there's a lot of kind of good, solid cards from the set, which in the right kind of shell or with the right meta could potentially see play. So Hard-Like Containment is kind of chained to the rocks, but slightly better. Well, I don't know if it's slightly better. It's different. Because it gives the permanent ward 1, but it does, an artifact is probably on the whole easier to remove for the opponent than a land, so it's an interesting one, worth paying attention to, particularly in dedicated artifact decks. Honor is just a very cheap kind of prowess and heroic style enabler. Those kind of Defiant Strike style effects with a permanent +1/+1 counter and draw a card. Obviously, downside is you have to do this one at sorcery speed, but I think is probably still worth it. Lightstall Inquisitor. This is an interesting one. It's a relevant creature type in being an angel. Angels are a good creature type in the format. Its ability to kind of strip at the opponent's hand is an interesting one. It's not as powerful, nowhere near as powerful as the ones that let you pick the card from the opponent's hand, because the opponent does get to choose, so they will often just be able to do it in a way that kind of minimizes the impact to them. But sometimes it might be a relevant effect, and a 2/1 for Vigilance in a relevant creature type is not the end of the world if you are later playing Angels. More Angels, which make this a better card. Desculpting Blast is a really good tempo play. So a 1 and blue instant that not only returns an on-land permanent to its owner's hand, but if it's attacking, and that's often when you cast these kind of spells, you get a drone artifact creature token with flying, which can then be used to ninjutsu in Kaito, and it's a really good tempo play. So one which may well see play. Quantum Riddler, I like this one, 4/6 for 5, but it has warp of 1 and a blue, so this can potentially come down pretty early in the game if you just need to draw some extra cards, and then later on it's going to turn into a kind of Consecrated Sphinx style effect, just drawing lots and lots of cards, particularly when your opponent's empty. Your hand is empty, I should say. So yeah, pretty good. Timeline Color is the classic kind of zombie that comes back from the graveyard. Warp of black and pay 2 life, which you can use from the graveyard for a 2/2 haste for 2, is pretty powerful. So yeah, I think in a deck which can kind of abuse this with Sephiroth triggers or whatever it might be, and just do it over and over again, if you have a sack outlet, then you can pretty quickly just close out the game with something like this, just looping the Timeline Color over and over. As the warp effect doesn't take effect until the end of turn. So if you sacrifice it again, you can warp it again. So yeah, pretty good. 0 Point Ballad is our kind of meat hook massacre of the day. Slightly different in that it's a sorcery for X and a black. Destroys all creatures with toughness X or less, and you lose X life. If X is 6 or more, return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So there's a bit of push and pull, obviously, with this card. You want to get the X is 6 or more to get the value of getting a creature back, but at the same time that will cost you more life. So I don't think it's as good as Meat Hook, but it's situationally, I think, pretty powerful, and potentially another good black sweeper that you want to consider as a sideboard option. And then finally, Frenzied Baloth, which I don't think has a home quite yet. The lack of strength of control in the format means that this potentially isn't that amazing, but there's a lot of keywords on this, and it's sort of questing beast style effect. 3/2 for 2, can't be countered, trample, haste, creature spells you control can't be countered, combat damage can't be prevented. 2 toughness, 2 mana, 2 mana value does mean it dies to basically everything. But yeah, one of those kind of very clearly sculpted cards that is definitely worth paying attention to. So moving on to the proper top 10 list. So at number 10 we have Umbral Collar Zealot, 1 and a black for a 3/2 with an unconditional sack outlet. So sacrifice another creature or artifact, which is even better. Surveil 1, which is good kind of card selection. So yeah, this is one of the few unconditional sacrifice outlets in the format. We do have a couple of others, like Bartholomew del Presidio, but this is easier on the mana, can be played in any deck with black rather than black-white, which Bartholomew requires. The Surveil value is good. You can do it multiple times, which makes it a turn, which makes it better than the 3/2 legend that can do it from Aether Drift. You know, it combines incredibly well with all the sacrifice payoffs, your Sephiroths, your Mayhem Devils. You know, I was talking previously about that warp creature that can come back every turn. I mean, this is the sack outlet that lets you do that. As I say, it's got aggressive stats for its casting cost. I mean, you wouldn't expect necessarily anything better than a 3/2 for 2. Is pretty good, particularly with upside. And yeah, it just kind of does its thing better than almost all the alternatives. So yeah, definitely one to pay attention to. Sacrifice is a relevant ability in the format. You know, there are decks which try and make the most of the ability to sacrifice other creatures and artifacts. So yeah, I think this will almost certainly see play somewhere. Number 9 is Arch Enemy's Charm. So the one of the mono-colored charm cycles. So we got the blue one in Modern Horizons 1, the green one, which I think was in what was that in? Was that in Murders of Karlov Manor, maybe, I think. So this one is black, black for an instant. Choose one, exile target creature or planeswalker, return 1 or 2 target creature and or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand, or put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. So the mono-colored charm cycles are not to be underestimated. Particularly, I think, mono black is already a thing in the format. Mono black decks are quite powerful, decks which are primarily black. This being kind of 3 black mana does provide a little bit of tension with wanting to run Mutavaults and stuff, but you also have Urborg, which can turn your Mutavaults into swamps, so I don't think that's too big a deal. But yeah, this is a very versatile card, plays well against multiple decks in the meta, just good unconditional exile-based removal, a little bit of card advantage, or then just a way of kind of gaining some life back against the popular aggro decks. Yeah, there's just a lot going on here that make its 3 mana value pretty good. I would say it's more powerful than the green charm, not as good as blue, but blue was kind of a Modern Horizons card, so it was designed to be pushed more than potentially a standard legal one. But yeah, pretty good charm. Number 8, we've got Synthesizer Labship. So on the whole, I'm pretty down on spacecrafts as a type in Constructed. I think they're good in Limited when the opponent will have not as much removal for your creatures, but you know, the board in Pioneer is never particularly stacked, and if it is, you want to be attacking the opponent, not using your cards to station and kind of just turn on another creature, because you're essentially just wasting time. But you know, this one has some relevant abilities quite low down. I mean, the 4/4 Flying Vigilance, if you can ever get to kind of 9 charge counters on it, is good, and kind of combines quite nicely with Metalwork Colossus, kind of in the relevant artifact decks in the format. Play a Metalwork Colossus for the cheap. It can't attack the turn it comes into play, so you may as well just station the Synthesizer Labship and get it all the way up to 9 in one go. But its 2+ ability to turn kind of any artifact you control into a 2/2 flyer for a turn is pretty good. You know, in Soul, artifact kind of lists exist on the fringes of the format, and this helps provide just that additional punch. You know, turning any of those cheap artifact tokens that come with the Epicure or the Spyglass Siren into 2/2s that can just chip away at the opponent and then potentially turn this into a creature later on. So yeah, exactly where this fits. Do you want it in Soul? Do you want it in Metalwork? I don't know. There's potential there, so I think this is one definitely worth looking at in the future. Number 7 is our Planeswalker. So we got Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. So 4 loyalty, 3 mana Planeswalker. Whenever an artifact you control enters, put a loyalty counter on it, which is a very powerful passive ability. 0, untap target creature or artifact. If it's an artifact creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. -3, search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. -7, you get an emblem at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 robot artifact creature. So this one's probably not as good as it is in older formats, you know, those kind of modern legacy vintage, which just play infinite cheap artifacts, is going to trigger its passive over and over again. But, you know, in Pioneer there are lots of things which generate incidental artifacts, which can just help power this up. You know, it has a very relevant ultimate, because more often, I would say than not, you're going to be getting up towards 7 loyalty. The artifact synergy is strong in the format, and it's relatively easy to build around and snowball into its ultimate. So yeah, and the ultimate will kind of again with that kind of Ensoul style effect, just having that as a repeatable effect, growing the creatures that you've already ensouled, or just creating a new one if the opponent's dealt with it. And the -3, you know, going to fetch something like a Colossus Hammer might potentially be relevant. Again, not as relevant as in Modern, for example, where that kind of 3rd chapter of Urza's Saga can get some pretty powerful stuff. But yeah, Tezzeret, good Planeswalker. Number 6, this is a fun one. Tanuk Steadfast Second, 2 and 2 red for a 3/5. Legendary Kavu pilot. We love to see Kavus back. Other creatures you control have haste, artifact cards, and red creature cards you in your hand have warp 2 and a red, so that kind of sneak attack style effect, just putting something really powerful into play, getting to attack with it for a turn if it's a creature, or just kind of getting value off it. So Purphoros is already a thing in the format, the Beyond Death version of this. But it is 5 mana. This is more expensive, and Warp does allow you to cast the cards again later, where Purphoros just sends them to the graveyard. So yeah, aggressively statted again, 3/5 for 4, that gives all of your other creatures haste, is pretty good. Also worth saying that unlike Purphoros, this can put down non-creature artifacts like Portal to Phyrexia, those ones which get huge amounts of value straight away, make the opponent sacrifice their board. But you know, similarly, it can do the powerful red creatures as well, Drakaseth, Progenitus, whatever it is you might want. You can kind of build around this and potentially use its warp effect, warp enabling effect to maximum value. It may be a little too slow, I don't know, in the format, 4 mana to cast, and then you probably need to wait a turn, so whether it survives or not. But yeah, as a card to build around, certainly one that's worth paying attention to. So moving on to number 5, we have a pretty solid mono red card. So Plasma Bolt is a 1 red sorcery, deals 2 damage to a target, and void if it deals 3 damage instead if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. So it's another one in our series of not quite lightning bolts, which I don't think we're ever going to see again in standard, but you never know. So mono red is a pretty powerful archetype already in the format, as many people will know who have to suffer through playing it on the ladder. Another potential 3 damage to the face for 1 mana is worth paying attention to, with that kind of skewer the critics style clause, where if something happens it becomes much better. The void may be slightly awkward on this one, as it requires something to have left the battlefield, and often you just want to be aiming burn at their face. But you can imagine a scenario where you're using 1 spell to clear a blocker out the way, attacking for a decent chunk of damage, and then using Plasma Bolt to just get that additional punch in. So yeah, pretty good card, I would say, and a likely inclusion in those decks that are just looking to burn the opponent pretty quickly. Yeah, good card, Plasma Bolt, solid red burn spell. So at number 4 we've got Cosmogrand Zenith. So this is a 2/4 for 3, because that's how much stuff costs now for 2/4s. And whenever you cast your second spell each turn, choose 1, create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this card stats are pushed beyond belief. Just you know, that just does so much for 3 mana. Yes, realistically, a lot of the time it's not actually going to be a 3-drop, because you're going to want to cast it and then immediately get value off it. But it's a human, and humans is a powerful archetype already, has a lot of cheap spells to enable the second spell clause on this. So yeah, humans is, I think, where this deck potentially belongs. It is competing with Adeline at 3 mana, and, you know, Adeline it kind of does its thing by itself as long as you have something on the battlefield. This has more powerful abilities. The 2/1/1s is better than 1/1/1, particularly given the Adeline 1/1 is tapped and attacking, so will often be chump attacking. And then the ability to kind of put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, that kind of Thalia's Lieutenant ability. It's kind of doing both in a single creature. Yeah, it takes a little bit more work to make it happen, but yeah, very good card. Number 3, we have Sunset Saboteur. So speaking of push stats, so a 4/1 for 2 mana in black with Menace. It has Ward of discard a card. Whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature an opponent controls. So this is an incredibly difficult card for the opponent to block, despite setting a very quick clock with its 4 power and Menace. Particularly in the early game, the opponent's often got no choice but to trade 2 for 1 with kind of 2 smaller creatures. And it's difficult to remove any other way. The kind of Ward of discard a card is painful. Again, creates a kind of 2 for 1 style effect. It's very hard to avoid not being 2 for 1 by this card. And, you know, we've all seen from Graveyard Trespasser that the Ward of discard a card can often be really annoying and difficult to deal with. So yeah, wouldn't underestimate that ability. Yeah, in mono black heavy decks, you know, you can minimize that drawback by just running enough removal, being able to kill the opponent's creatures and then attack. You know, can't have that drawback if the opponent doesn't have any creatures. So yeah, super quick clock against the opponent's life total in mono black aggro, and not easily removed either in combat or by removal. So yeah, will often be a source of kind of card disadvantage for the opponent. So yeah, good card. Seam Rip. So this seems the most obvious one to pick from the cards in the set. I probably should have put it at number 1, but I often like to choose something a bit more spicy for number 1 that has a bit more kind of variance and odds, and the odds of it seeing play are a bit less certain, just for the fun of it. So yeah, this is a functional portable hole reprint. So 1 white mana for an enchantment. When it enters, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So yeah, it's portable hole, but as an enchantment. So it's pretty certain that this will see at least some play. It's very efficient removal. Portable hole is a great card. On balance, it's probably better in most situations, as I think it's hard to say, but I think as Overlords has declined and kind of cards like Corey Steelcutter have risen in stock, I think artifact removal is slightly more common in the format than enchantment removal. It's marginal, as often, you know, those kind of effects do the same thing. It's artifact or enchantment, but sometimes it isn't. Particularly in like red, red struggles with enchantment removal. So yeah, I think on balance is probably slightly better, and it combines nicely with the new temporary lockdown sweeper, which name escapes me, which only hits creatures and artifacts. So which on the face of it is kind of worse than temporary lockdown, but if you're combining it with Seam Rip, then actually they're not a nombo anymore. So yeah, it's a good one. This one, as I say, we'll definitely see play. Kind of, I think, whether you play this or portable hole kind of depends on the meta, what else your deck is doing. If it cares about enchantments, then obviously this is better. But yeah, it will see at least some amount of play. And number 1, so yeah, my kind of slightly out there pick, although I think most people agree this is a good card, but I think a lot of people are undervaluing just how good it is Consult the Star Charts. So 1 and a blue, instant with kicker of 1 and a blue. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you control. Put 1 of those cards into your hand. If this spell was kicked, put 2 of those cards into your hand instead. So yeah, it's like people are saying, oh, it's probably not as good as Stock Up or Dig Through Time. And yeah, in a vacuum, I think that's probably true. But yeah, it's both of them is the thing. Like it's both those cards. It scales incredibly well. Kind of at worst, if you're kind of running this in a control deck, it's the first half of a Memory Deluge, which is pretty good already. You know, that kind of 2 from the top 4. On turn 4, later on in the game, it potentially picks you 2 from the top 8, 9, 10 cards. It becomes basically dig through time. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but in a deck, in a control deck where you're just draw go, seeing what the opponent does, and then tapping out at the end of turn, then yeah, this is very, very good. So yeah, I think this will definitely see play. I think it's very, very versatile in the early game. You can just use it to fix your mana, get another land drop, whatever it is you need, and then yeah, just later on in the game, wait on it, cast it for its more expensive mode, get lots of cards to look at, and then pick 2 of them into your hand at instant speed. Pretty spicy as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that is my number 1, consult the star charts. So yeah, that's the top 10 from Edge of Eternities. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm interested to know what you think, so let me know in the comments where you agree, where you disagree, where you think I've missed something off. You know, there's a lot of potentially good cards in this set, so I'm sure that something will rise up and kind of prove its worth. Hopefully I won't have quite as big a miss as I did on Corey Steelcutter last time. I did actually make the effort to read all of the cards before I put them in the list, so hopefully nothing like that will happen, but we shall see. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and contribute to the Coffee account if you can. I do really appreciate it. And yeah, Edge of Eternities in the next few days, so we'll be back soon with some gameplay videos, and I'll see you next time.